Okay, well, that could have been better. All right, guys, we're apparently going to have a cold open tonight. So what's different? All right, so we're just talking into the void right now, and at some point, the video switching should actually kick in, or not. All right, here we are. Yes, the one thing that did not kick in here is the link to our stream deck. So we will have no fancy pre-rolled graphics this time out. Sorry about that, everyone. Um, Amusing things have been happening on my computer lately, and I did not get a chance to do a full roll through before the show. And this is the kind of thing that happens. Hi, welcome to the ComicBase Livestream. If you hadn't figured this out ahead of time, you are the best produced show on the internet. By best, I mean probably worst. But I'm your host, Pete Bickford. And for a bit, we're going to be going through all sorts of fun things, but in particular, this time out, I want to, and comes on the back of a couple of really lengthy tech support calls that we took earlier in the week. I want to go over some things you can do with ComicBase to kind of get yourself set up for success right from the word go. And this is going to be old hat to a lot of the old folks out here, but hopefully we have some interesting things to say. But it's really out there for the folks who are, kind of getting new or getting back into the program after a time away and are seeming like, they're just running into glitches or running into just problems that maybe you didn't need to do or didn't need to happen to you. We'll be talking about that. Before we get into, though, I did want to say hi to the folks. First of all, just hello to our wrench, Mr. Gregory Hecht, who's in here as long as he can. He's got other pressing engagements, so he might be bailing out a little early, but you guys behave yourselves anyway, because I don't want to have to wrench you myself. Robbie Weinberg saying hi from Toledo. Mike Beam, welcome from Vancouver. Oro Viejo from Minneapolis, welcome. It is a lovely day out here in Franklin, Tennessee. I just got done doing yard work and filing comic books, which is always fun to do right up until about 3 minutes before showtime, which is why I'm so very well prepared. But looking forward to a beautiful night out on the deck if we can get through the show in one piece. So we'll take it from there. Before I get into the show proper, though, I did want to say, if you don't have it yet, please go in ComicBase, say Internet, check for updates, and download ComicBase 24.1. That is the latest version of the program. It's basically our big quarterly wrap up of all the different fixes and improvements we've done over the last, really in this case, it's about 7 or 8 months. So it's more than quarterly for this one, because we've had a really stable launch of ComicBase 2024. But everything we did do, we finally had a priority 1 bug. It was obscure, what you had to do to trigger it. But if you did trigger it, it'd be like, okay, this one actually fixes a bug that would actually cause real problems. So that's what actually forced us to go and do this one. But it's got a lot of great stuff in it anyway. We've added, it's something like 1.25 million comics in the database at this point. If you've got the archive edition, there's something, was 1,042,000 as of the last week's update. A lot of great stuff that we've rolled into this one. So please, if you haven't done so yet, please go to Internet, check for updates, and just when it says, hey, there's a new version of the program, install the new version before you do anything else, and that will get you going. All right, so let me just take one last round here. Looks like we are good here. So, and Minneapolis checking in here from a beautiful spring day in Minneapolis. Right on. All right, so this is the part where if I had a marketing team proper, they would be firing me right now, because I'm doing something that I'm kind of like mentally reviewing the show in my head before you even give it. And this is the part where I say, like, Bickford, what are you talking about? Like startup problems, and like, you're just telling people that bad things will happen if you use the program and everything. And for the record, if you have a brand new computer right off the shelf, you install Windows right off the shelf on it, you install ComicBase right off the shelf, and you do nothing but hit the default settings, expect everything to work just beautifully. Really nothing bad should happen. Everything should be pretty well optimized for working, great and things like that. It's not really what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is more, forgive me for anyone who's got relatives who are maybe a little bit older or fancy themselves not particularly computer savvy and things like that, is I've just really gotten an education over the years of how really rotten computers are to use. I mean, we try like crazy to make everything, as smooth as can possibly be. And, we're, as a small company, very invested in if we're doing anything that causes us to get tech support, it's really in our nature to try to say, well, what could we possibly be doing to head off the tech support before it even happens? But just the way the computer ecosystem is these days is there's a lot of things that just, man, if you're not careful, just it'll zonk you. And it's not anything you're doing in particular. It's not, anything like that, but just is a confluence of interests that oftentimes work in a way that just kind of sets you up for failure. So what we're trying to do today is kind of set you up for success. So what I'm guessing is that you've got a fairly substantial computer, comic book collection that you would like to manage in a reasonable way with as least problem as possible. It's hard enough schlepping all those boxes hither and yon and pulling things, making sure everything's bagged and boarded properly and graded. You want to make the computer entry of this thing as easy as can possibly be done. And that's why you bought ComicBase, right? Because we make it possible to manage a serious comic book collection without going nuts. But let's back up the process to the beginning here. Maybe you're watching this one before you have even gotten into the program or thinking about it. And let's talk about, from the word go, from buying the computer itself, what you'd want to do to have as easy a time using ComicBase as possible. Now, by the way, through the show, there's a good chance I will be showing off, certain things in the program. If so, I'll be showing them to you on you'll be amazed, a $249 program, computer. So it doesn't take much of a spend in order to have a decent time using the program. But what it does take is, it does take having some sense of what the parts of your computer do, and not just buying the first thing that catches your eye down at Best Buy or Costco or wherever you buy your computer. So let's get into that first. So number one, so get the right computer. So we're used to talking about like minimum system requirements, things like that. I'm going to not talk exactly about the minimum system requirements. You can read about those ones online. I'm going to talk about the minimum to be happy using the program, because everybody always lies and says, well, yeah, you can run this thing on a 2 megabyte Raspberry Pi, from 20 years ago, whatever. Yes, it's technically possible, but it doesn't mean you'll enjoy using it. Let's talk about the minimum requirement you'll have to enjoy using ComicBase. And by the way, to say that, it doesn't mean you have to spend money. Our main demo computer we use here cost us all of $249, fully configured. So it's not a big deal. But the main specs you want is you're looking for the computer to run ComicBase. You want 8 gigs of RAM or greater. Greater's always good, but below 8 gigs, you'll notice that Windows just slows up, because really Windows wants 4.5, 5 gigs just for itself, just to be happy. And so any program, especially a big database like ComicBase that's running, you got to give us a little bit of space, because if you don't have at least something like 8 gigs, what'll happen is your computer will spend all its time swapping, what should be laying in your computer's memory. It'll swap that between your computer's disk and what little memory you do have on a constant basis, and things just get slow, especially if you've got other things open or you're running big other suites at the same time. You kind of choke your program if you don't have, let's call it 8 gigs worth. Now, can you run down 4? Yeah, you can, but you'd have to be really careful. 8 gigs is really the minimum you'd really want. 16 is good if you can get it. 32 is fine. After that, just don't worry. It will not help you as far as making your computer faster. But look for 8. And it's hard to buy a computer with less than 8 these days. So let's not belabor that one too much. How fast does my computer need to be? If you're talking about an Intel type of computer, especially, you're looking for one who will clock out at 3 gigahertz or faster. Now, obviously, the higher numbers, the better. You especially would like to have what's called more cores, so that you can run more processes at the same time. And what we're talking about there is you want, ComicBase is going to occupy 1, maybe 2 threads at a time, which, it's doing 1 or 2 jobs at a time. But Windows will be doing jobs at the same time. You will probably have other computer programs on your computer, your mails pulling in, things like that. And if you've got very, very weak processors, the kind that they would use in like network computers or like your kid's budget laptop that they gave them for school, things like that, sometimes they really, really choke off, how many threads your computer is allowed to run in order to put out a computer that runs for $100. That being said, if you spent $249 on your computer or better, you probably got enough to be perfectly fine as far as the actual processor speed. Um, you're also going to want, and this one is something that they kind of jip you out on the cheaper computers. You'd like a screen that's at least 1024 pixels tall or better. Now you can get away with less. There's a couple of screens in the program that we're trying to display a lot of information for you and things like that. That things in the current version might get a little chopped off if you're below the official minimum spec that we give you is 1,000 pixels. Now, realistically, one of the things we're doing as we move forward is because we are realizing we live in a world of kind of cheap laptops with small screens, and everyone's eyes are getting like worse as we get older, and so we're trying to make things bigger, which means that we can have less pixels, but they're bigger. So we're actually moving heaven and earth right now to make it so the program runs better on really the crummiest, lowest spec monitor you could possibly get. That being said, if you have a monitor that gives you less than about 1,000 pixels of height, you're just going to find things a little bit more tedious. There's more scrolling to do. You're often going to want to see more information on screen in one place than is convenient, because there's just a lot of data involved with comic books. So I would say if you're using a monitor like a really low-end laptop, or for whatever reason you've got the screen really pitched very high so that you can see it very easily, invest in yourself in an auxiliary monitor or something else that'll give you that 1,000 or better pixels of height. You'll just be a much happier person. But anyway, that I'm going to say is one of the big productivity tips, if nothing else. All right. I'm not going to beat this next one up too much because I bang on about it almost every time I talk about buying a computer. But get yourself a solid state disk drive. An SSD is how you hear them done these days. And also, again, if you're buying a new computer in the age, in the year 2024, it's hard to buy one that doesn't come with this built in. Solid-state disk drives are basically solid-state electronics. They're taking the place of an old spinning mechanical platter that used to store the data on your old laptop or desktop and so forth. Particularly in the old days with desktop hard drives, the hard drive that we built into your old-style laptop was the slowest thing on the computer by far. It was spinning very slow because they wanted to make it very stable. Laptop drives in particular take a lot of shocks, and they want to be able to have this thing be bounced up and down without getting a lot of disk errors. So they wouldn't be spinning it very fast. And it just due to the mechanics of it needing to take a metal platter and spin it all the way around, try to wait for the part with the data that they're looking at to read. That thing would chunk a lot before it got the data off of it, especially in the old days with anyway, things have gotten much better since then. But the thing that absolutely changed the game on all of it was when all that stuff became solid state memory, where suddenly you went from a drive that would typically pull, say, 20 megabytes per second or 30 megabytes per second throughput. Suddenly you can add 1 or 2 zeros to how fast that thing can go on a modern laptop. And for a disk-based program like ComicBase, because databases are all about your disk, man, oh man, oh man, what a difference that makes. It's the difference between your computer booting in a couple minutes and your computer booting in a couple of seconds, like 20, 30 seconds. And for launching ComicBase, we used to have this opening music that was there just to cover over the 8 or 10 seconds it took to launch the program and open the database. We actually got rid of that in modern versions because typically, if nothing else is going on your computer, not at all unusual for you to double click the ComicBase icon and be looking at the database in 3 seconds. So on a modern SSD based computer. So that's how much of a difference the SSDs make in your thing. Do not buy a new computer whose primary hard drive is not an SSD under any circumstances. There's no excuse for it. It used to be these things were crazy expensive. They're not anymore. A 1 terabyte SSD goes for about $50 now. And so, I just bottom line, do not buy one that does not have at least an SSD. Preferably, you're looking for one's called an NVMe SSD. If you want to breathe deep into the technical specs, it's a non-volatile memory extended, I believe is what that stands for. But basically, it's an SSD that's essentially connected directly to the PCI bus of your computer. If you were to pop it out and look at it, it almost looks like a stick of RAM. But the modern SSDs are even 5 or so times faster than the ones that were out 5 years before them. But yeah, the bottom line: do not buy a modern computer without an SSD. You want ComicBase on the drive that has the SSD, and take it from there. You will be very happy. All right, next up, you're going to want Windows 11, except no substitutes. You can be using Windows 10 still. It's supported by ComicBase. Technically, we're not gonna not run on older versions of Windows, like Windows 8.1 or 8.0 and things like that. But you, at this point in time, do not want to be running anything less than Windows 11. The reason is Windows 10 has been announced. Its end of life is coming up, which means that within about a year and a half, a little less, Windows 10 will not be getting any virus or any other kind of security patches from Microsoft, which means that it is a nigh certainty in the entire history of Windows that within a month of that of them no longer patching it, that you will be in a position, if you're still using that old thing, where someone will have put out an exploit which will destroy your computer and everything on it, allow hackers to take control of it, and Windows will not be there to help you. So if you're using Windows 10, find a way off of Windows 10. If you're buying a new computer, absolutely, it's going to come with Windows 11 anyway, so that's fine. Just use it. It's the one you want to go with. If you have an older working computer that is still good, and there's a lot of you out there, there were a couple hardware features with computers where Microsoft wanted to lock down certain parts of the operating system against certain kinds of very obscure tech exploits. And as a result, they put in some requirements that you have a thing called a trusted protected memory, TPM module. 2.0 or better built into your computer in order to run Windows 11. So if you ever try to upgrade to Windows 11 and it says your computer is not allowed to, that is typically the reason why not. That is not by itself, in my estimation, a really big deal. But certainly if you're buying a new computer, Windows 11 is going to come on it. It'll be up to the modern specs, and you should be happy with it. But if you've got an old machine that's still running Windows 10 and it's otherwise a fast computer, yeah, go ahead and baby it out for a little while. I mean, that's fine. But do be looking on a new computer certainly to be running Windows 11. All right. And then lastly, as far as hardware stuff I want to talk about, is you're going to want, I'm going to say, a fast enough internet connection. Now, what does fast enough mean? So I did a little digging on this one, and according to the FCC, for you to be considered having broadband in this day and age, you should be getting 100 megabits of speed down, which is basically enough for a couple, 3, maybe 4 even connections to Netflix pulling down 4K movies at the same time. But we've really upped what we consider fast broadband in the United States. Talking mostly to a U.S. audience. If you're in a foreign country, many are better, many are, some are worse. But that's I'm going to focus the audience on U.S. kind of standards for the moment. So even for rural areas, you're looking for 100 megabits down is quite comfortable for most people in terms of if you're actually getting that speed from your internet provider. Obviously faster is better. The up speed, not as important. It matters a little bit for things like saving files to our servers and things like that, where it's a little bit nicer if you've got a faster connection, but it's not a game changer. Most of the internet for most users is all about how fast you can get data down to you, not how fast you can push it up to the internet. So but one thing I would do is right now, if you haven't done it in a while, go to a site called speedtest.net. Speedtest.net, and let it look at your internet connection and see what kind of speed you're really getting. Now, your cable company, your internet, your ISP, they call it internet service provider, is typically going to say, yeah, well, we're going to give you speeds up to, and then they'll name a number. It's a nice round number, and you have a right to expect that you're getting not 100% of that all the time. It doesn't work that way. There's various things that will clip a little bit off the top, various environmental and line conditions that'll take some off there. But I gotta say, if you're not getting 80% of what they give you most of the time, call them up and have them roll a truck out and figure out why the hell not. So if one of the people I was working with earlier this week had been promised a 100 megabit down internet connection by I think it was AT&T, they were really getting like 20. By the way, that's a guest starring spot here by Dodger the Wonder Dog, who's preventing me right now from obviously being killed and dismembered whole by the Amazon driver up out front, which is what every dog fancies they're doing, is that they are the elite commandos saving their owners from certain death. Unfortunately, very, very loud, and this is going out live, so we will not be editing this part out. We're just going to talk right over it. Anyway, but yes, do go to speedtest.net, compare it with your internet plan, and make sure you're getting most of what they promise you. If there isn't, a lot of times they can get you a new modem, they can fix some kind of quality issue on your line, whatever the thing is. But if you're paying for it, get it. It makes a profound difference in this day and age. We are fundamentally a disk-based, disk-based meaning that ComicBase lives on your computer. But in this era, there's so much stuff we're pushing out to you over the internet. There's so much stuff you'll want to push to us, whether it's saving backups to the cloud, posting things for sale online, browsing for listings of comic books you're looking for. That there's so much going on that if you're not getting a decent internet in there, it's gonna just it's like working through glue. You don't want to be jogging through glue, and that's what it's going to feel like if your internet is just hosey. One last thing I'm going to say about this: it's possible. You will sit there and say, hey, my internet, I call my provider, I'm only getting 20 megabits down or 5 megabits down. Right? We've actually seen cases where people are getting in the, in the hundreds of, and not even megabits, whatever it is, like, where you're basically getting like a little better than modem speeds out of your, old dial-up modem speeds out of your thing. Some of that can be, again, a quality issue coming right down from the internet provider to your home or your place where your modem is. Some of it also can be, if you're on a wireless connection, consider getting off of it, getting a wired connection, or fixing how your interior Wi-Fi works or whatever the thing is. But if you're sitting there and down in the basement and your wireless connection is up in the main floor of your house or whatever the thing is, yeah, it could be that everything's fine with your internet connection at large, but you're murdering it by what's going on inside your house. So that's something to check out. But the very first thing I would do is go to speedtest.net, compare it against what you're paying for with your internet provider. And if they're radically different, call them up. And if they do a test to their modem and they say, hey, man, we're getting 100 megs to our modem, the problem's in the house, well, then you know where you need to go to fix it. But do get it fixed, because like I say, this is the year 2024. And a decent internet connection is a minimum spec for life at this point. It's not anything about your computer, but it's just, if your internet connection is hosed, just everything in your life, including ComicBase, is going to just start grinding on you, and that's not any fun. All right, let's move on from that, and now let's talk. So now you've got your computer, you're hooked up to the internet. Let's talk about Windows for a little bit. Now, excuse me just a moment here, because I'm going to do just a modest adjustment here to see if I can get the. I think there were folks working in my office earlier, and I think they might have knocked an HDMI cable for me for just a moment. So talk amongst yourselves for just a second as I'm waiting for my HDMI switcher to appear on my main monitor, because I see it in what they call the confidence monitor, but I don't see it. I don't see it appearing on the live stream, and I'd really rather not demo this thing straight from my other computer. So give me just a second. We're jiggling cables. All right, so I still see it on the one monitor, and I still don't see it on the other. Well, that's a bummer. Checking. Let's HDMI port 6. Yeah, that cable's snug and secure. So, well, darn it. Well, I might have to demo this from the computer I don't usually demo from, but you know what? The show must go on, and we're gonna do what we gotta do. All right, so let's see what I can do just real quickly. But if this doesn't happen, then we will play through. Display settings. Let's look at. Do you see the monitor? Multiple displays. There you are. Yeah. Detect. Yeah. Yeah, it didn't find another display. Of course you didn't. Okay, great. Well, that part's fun. All right, so we're gonna, like I say, we're gonna play through. All right. Let me just set up this computer so that I can demo my ComicBase and other things like that on my other monitor, and we're just gonna take it as we got it. Give me just a second here, guys. In the meantime, let me go ahead and say a couple things to the folks who are in the chat here. Jet Comics joining us out here. Not too late. No, we're getting there. ComicBase isn't solid state disk drive an oxymoron. Well, I don't know. I mean, horseless carriage. It's like we have that for the automobile. Hello, everyone. Hello from Jeff Wilkie out in Maple Valley, Washington. Little Boy Designs joining us over here. Let's see here. Talking about the hardware for your scan bar tool. I have 1,000 10-cent comics which I input by hand. There are thousands more of the barcode. Tell you input into ComicBase. So with barcode scanners, and I'm actually, I think I'm just going to get into that. If you collect modern comic books, it's worth it to get a barcode scanner. It just is. The reason is because if nothing else, there are so many variants and so many crazy things about finding modern comic. Like if we were collecting in 1990. Right, and we were talking about like the Avengers. I'd be looking at a copy of the Avengers. It would say, actually, I think I have to go back to 1980 to say this. If I'm looking at Avengers 285, there only was one series called the Avengers. I would go to issue 285. I would be done. I would know what I'm looking at. It would be very easy to do. There weren't a million variants. There weren't a million other things that just kind of make it kind of miserable to collect comic books. Unfortunately, that is not the world we live in right now. Nowadays, it is. Oh, and good. My monitor on the conference one rebooting did make that better. So yay. In the modern world, I just entered the week's comics in. It was 50 different comic books that involved 11 new titles that they were the first of their kind, because everything's a mini series that runs 3 issues anymore. There was one that was a 12th series of a given title. There was almost all of them were variants of one sort or another. At this point, I believe it's a number like 95% of all comics released in a given month are a variant of one sort or another. Anyway, all this amounts to is, even if you've got photo reference for everything, even if you've got a picture of everything, getting to the right comic book unless you just live in the previews catalog, memorizing it all from day to day, which a lot of us do, but even then, it's so much easier to enter a comic book by just basically bleeping the barcode on the back of the whole thing, letting ComicBase match it up to exactly, oh, you mean that's, Punisher 13th series, number 2, variation J. So much easier than saying, okay, this is the Punisher, right? It's published in that 2024. Okay, so it's either the 12th or the 13th series. I don't know, let's go with 13th. Finding the list, scrolling down, going to issue number 2, and then going through all the variants and saying, oh, there it is, the J variant. You would have been on to 6 other comics by now if you could have just bleeped the barcode in. So I would say, when in doubt, if you collect modern comic books, get a barcode scanner, get a real one. Your phone is not going to do the same job. It doesn't work nearly as fast. But blow a little money. You can get ours, you can get someone else's, but get a barcode scanner that'll read the whole code. As long as it reads the whole code and nothing but the code, it doesn't add anything to it, but it gets all the digits that are printed. If it'll do that reliably, it'll work with ComicBase. But anyway, if you collect modern comic books, so basically comic books after 1991, your life is just going to get a lot better if you have a barcode scanner. All right, so what if you're talking about older comic books? What if you've got comic books from like the 10-cent era? Is barcode scanner going to help you? Not much, because there's no barcodes. There's nothing to scan. What you can do is, once you've figured out that this is, Avengers number 3, actually, I don't think there never were any 10-cent Avengers. So Action Comics number 3. So once you figure that out, you can print an identity label and put it on the thing, and that identity label will have a barcode on it. So in the future, if you want to then check out that thing or reference, if you're pulling a bunch of comic books out to review for some reason, you want to get back to their entries in the database, at that point, getting to them is very quick, using the barcode scanner on the label that you've printed out if you've applied to it. But in terms of just entering a collection, prior to about 1991 is about where barcodes got useful. They started to get used at the end of the 70s, very end of the 70s, a little bit into the 80s, but they were the barcodes they had at the time, they would reuse them a bunch, so they're a little more cumbersome to use even when you had them. But then the bigger thing that happened is the direct market came out. So basically, the idea came out that we could split where we sell comic books into not just the local 7-Eleven or Tom Thumb or wherever you had comics to buy. Those guys, when they bought comic books back in the old days, your local newsstand, if they didn't sell a comic book at the end of the day, they could return it. They could rip the cover off or just send it back, and they would get 50, half their money or 80% of their money back, just returning the things they didn't sell. So at some point around 1983, going to say about then, they came up with the genius idea of saying, well, okay, tell you what, I will order comic books from you at a much steeper discount if the deal is I'll get a heavier discount, but I don't get to send them back if they don't sell. That's called the direct market. I want to say Phil Suling was the guy who came up with the idea behind that one. And the publishers, in order to distinguish between the comics that they sold for the direct market, this new comic shop thingy that they were coming up with, and the ones that people could send back if they didn't sell, if they didn't sell, is they would switch between, okay, we'll put a barcode on the one that went to the regular market, the 7-Eleven, and the same issue of Amazing Spider-Man or something that we're selling to the direct market, we'll put a little squiggle of Spider-Man in there where the barcode would have been. And so as a result, the comic books that we look back on from, say, 83 to about 1991, a lot of times the comic books that we've got don't even have the barcode, even if there's another edition of that comic book that did have the barcode. But after about 1991, I'm going to say somewhere in the middle of the summer, Diamond Comics Distribution, which at that point owned the comic market in the United States, just dropped the hammer and said, look, guys, everything that goes through us will have a barcode because it's a pain in the butt otherwise. And it'll be a proper barcode. It'll have 5 digits after the main barcode, which will, the idea is to uniquely designate the issue number, printing, and variant. And ever since then, barcodes have been great. So for the last 30-some years, barcodes have been great. Before then, I'm going to say it's not a clear win as to whether or not having a barcode scanner is helpful for you. But if you collect modern comic books or anything after 1991, oh yeah, if you have any quantity of them at all, get yourself a barcode scanner. It's a no-brainer. It just makes everything better. And let's see. Jeff Wilkie asks, those early barcodes that covered multiple issues, will ComicBase generate an issue-specific barcode for the labels? Yes. The barcode that you print on an ID label in ComicBase is always unique to that exact line in that exact database. So, so if you were running more than one database, you can't mix and match barcodes between those. You have, the barcode will belong to a particular database in a particular line, which makes it even possible to say, like, if I bought 5 different copies of the same comic book in different grades, or I bought them and I track different information about each one, the label that will you're printing off when you print ID label for the thing is going to point you back to the exact copy that you're referring to. All right, let's see. And Little Boy Design says, ComicBase sells a barcode scanner. That's the best pairing. Yeah, it is. I mean, like I say, the rules are, if your barcode scanner will show all the digits on the barcode and nothing else, it will work. It turns out it's ridiculously hard to find a reliable scanner that will do that. The kind of barcode that is printed on comic books is the format's called UPC-A. Also known as a variant of EAN13, if you guys love barcode nonsense. But specifically, it is with a +2 or +5 supplemental. What the heck is Bickford talking about? So there's a big barcode, and just to the right of that, typically for comic books, is a smaller group of digits. Now, on modern comic books, again, since 1991, almost all of them is a group of 5. But before that, there would be a group of 2. Those 2 digits used to represent, back in the 80s, it used to typically represent what month the book was printed in, which unfortunately meant that Captain America 189 and Captain America 201 would have the same barcode, because they were 12, they were 12 digits apart from 12 months apart from each other. Now, if you scan either one of them into ComicBase, we'll tell you, well, it could be this one or it could be that one, and we'll make you choose if you scan those in. But modern barcodes typically will take you straight to them, and also the barcodes that are printed on a label that ComicBase generates will take you to that exact line. No doubt on that one whatsoever. And so, yeah, we when we were sourcing our barcode scanners, the latest round of them in particular, we tried like 20 different models before we settled on the one we did. And it is actually ridiculously hard to find people that will uh, pick up the entire barcode on the first try, and hit that correctly. Most barcode scanners, if you just buy one off the shelf, off just the first rando guy selling you a barcode scanner on eBay, will get most of the time. What will happen is it'll be set to a mode called auto discriminate supplemental, which means that it will get the big barcode, the main bit, and it will sometimes get the smaller chunk with the issue number in it, and sometimes it won't. But of course, without the issue number stuff, we can't tell you what, without the whole code, we can't tell you what issue of the thing is you're looking at, and the program's just going to beep at you because we don't have enough information to tell you. And so you'll be cursing us, you'll be cursing your barcode scanner, etc. But if you were, scan it into, say, Notepad and see, well, what's my barcode scanner actually giving me, you'll find out that most of the time with most barcode scanners, not the ones that we sell because we had to get it specifically, tested for this, is they will be very dicey about picking up the whole code unless you do some special extra configuration on them. But anyway, so that's that. Let me see here. Okay, I don't have a comment on Crisis from Infinite Earths right now, but let's move on and talk about Windowsy stuff. All right. So basic information I'd give you for Windows. So okay, so you got your new computer, you got your barcode scanner, you're ready to rock, and you boot up Windows 11 because you're running Windows 11 because, again, we're going to stick with the current thing, right? All right. Number one tip: keep Windows updated. So Windows, like everything else in the modern era, everyone's on the internet, right? And it means that all the bad guys are on the internet as well. So Windows is constantly subject to any kind of bad thing people have ever figured out how to do to another computer over the internet. Most of it is being most of it's being done to Windows computers on the internet. And so Microsoft is constantly tweaking the program to fix whatever vulnerabilities are being discovered, and they're also tweaking the antivirus protection to make it so the bad guys can't get through. Keep your Windows updated. Microsoft. I'm going to be the one guy on the internet who says this in popular media, but Microsoft employs really the best programmers of any company in the world for the number that they employ. I mean, if you're going to have 40,000 people working on your software, damn, I'm continually impressed by how high the quality of code is that comes out of Microsoft, all things considered. That being said, you are talking about millions and millions of lines of code with so many different platforms, so many different drivers, such a complex architecture. It's a testament to how high quality that they are, that anything you're doing works at all. But the architectures they have built are so elaborate, and it's such an involved ecosystem that there's always something going wrong. And so Microsoft is very, very good when they find anything wrong about fixing it. They're constantly putting out patches. They typically do about once a month with something that's sort of a general release. At least twice a year, they will do a fairly major feature and other update to the Windows ecosystem and so forth. And probably on about a weekly basis, they're putting out virus definition patches and things like that. So that's a lot of stuff. And you're constantly needing to keep your stuff updated. Don't be that guy who says, oh yeah, there's update available for your computer. Do you want to get to it now or later? Don't be the guy who says later, because this stuff will eventually, I mean, look, most of it is not going to be earth shaking if you blow it off. But if you're the kind of guy who lets 87 different system updates just never get installed on your computer, eventually your time will come where one of them was super important and it will really hurt. Typically, I would say set your computer up in Windows Updates so that it is set for automatic updates. You don't need to say there's a checkbox for give me updates as fast as possible, and I don't care if you log me off right away. No, just do the regular default thing, but let your computer stay on at night. Let it restart to install updates. But generally, if you see that little notification in the bottom right hand of your computer that says, "Hey, Windows Action Center wants you to update something," go and install the damn update. You'd be better off doing it the first time you see it rather than blowing it off 800 times and saying, "Yeah, I'll get around to it later," because it's you're not saving any time this way. You're really just kind of blowing out your own ability to remember all the people nagging at you if you keep on seeing the job that needs to be done and letting it go. But yeah, typically whenever we're involved on like an hour and a half long tech support call, the last thing we'll see at the end of everything that we've done is we'll say, oh, and by the way, you also have 87 system updates for Windows that have not been installed. You really should install those because things. Anyway, but do keep your Windows updated. All right. Now, with that said, I'm going to give you something that sounds like contradictory advice, and this is the part where I start getting really, really sympathetic to. Guys, I mean, the stereotype is older people, but I'm going to say it's anyone who fancies that they are not a computer ninja. Is don't, and I'm going to say unless you are super confident, don't install a program that promises to keep all your drivers updated for you. There's a lot of people who sell those ones because what happens when people kind of form a shortcut in their head, because you just had me telling you, hey, keep Windows updated. So when Windows says I want to update something, let it update. So you kind of get that as okay, yeah, you should install updates. That's true, but here's where the bad guys kind of enter the picture. Is there are people who figured out that, well, okay, we've puppy trained everyone that they should be constantly on the watch for system updates and driver updates and things like that. Windows Update itself doesn't do all the things you might attach to your computer. There are things that the software vendor itself might want to install a graphic driver update, for instance. And this is true. And there are people who promise, yeah, we'll use our program and we'll automate the process and make sure you have all the latest updates for everything. This is not an irrational thing to promise. In effect, however, I'm going to say 95% of the time I've seen people running these kind of like install, update my everything things. It's either actively installing viruses and malware on your computer, or at the very least, it's wasting enormous amounts of your time installing old jank device drivers from the back of Beyond. Generally these, the third party will keep all your drivers updated programs are generally a scam. So I'm going to say if the update your drivers thing came from your motherboard manufacturer or Microsoft, or it came right from the source, sure, go ahead and use it. It's fine. But if you would come across a third-party ad telling you, oh, hey, install driver update, extravaganza palooza, that thing is probably there to install malware on your computer. Don't do it. So apologies, guys. Be a little careful on this one. All right. Next piece of general advice I'm going to give you, and this applies to all Windows. So number one, keep your Windows updated, but watch out for the third-party guys promising to be your all-in-one driver solution. Use the defaults. I said at the top of the show that whenever there's a setting or a problem with the program that is causing us to take tech support calls, it's really in our interest to try to stop that call from happening. And so, look, we love talking to you all and everything, but, we got to get things done during the day. And, most companies will figure out that, costs on average something like $30-$35 in employee time to take a tech support call, just to pick up the receiver for the average call. That's not cheap, which is also why you'll notice that a lot of times when you call up, somebody for tech support, there's just nobody there to call. There's no phone number, or at the very least, they make you really sweat to get somebody on the phone. So yeah, it's tech support's a really big concern for the industry. We all try to keep it away. One of the big ways we keep tech support away is we try and make it so the default setting, the setting right out of the box for everything, is going to be the one that it might not be the most optimal setting in the grand scheme of things for your particular situation, but it'll probably be the one that doesn't get you in trouble. And so, because what everyone knows is everyone will use the default settings, unless they're really an odd case. Unless they're exceptionally curious, clever, or whatever else, most people will just hit the next button. And I'm going to say, for Windows, generally that's the right thing to do. So, when I was again talking over myself with the idea, like, should I even be doing this show today? Because aren't you just making it look hard to use ComicBase? I had to say, well, look. A couple months ago, I got a brand new computer in, $249. I keep on harping on that one. So this is the bottom spec computer on the market, just about. installed, with basic, Windows 11 installed. Installed ComicBase Archive Edition, 4K Archive, the big one with the million covers, and was up, running, fully installed 18 minutes and change later, right? And by hitting the default on every single option that I was given. So, the 4 or 5 times you were asked, do you agree to the license? Do you want to put things in the default places? All the things like that. In general, yeah, use the defaults unless you're sure you know better. So that's a good general guideline. Don't overthink yourself into weird problems. So when we get tech support on things like disk issues and things like that, a lot of the time it's because people are thinking, well, I don't know, I have a certain vision in my head about, like, I'd like to keep, my programs in one place, my data in another place, and this hard drive over here is bigger than the other hard drive, so I want to move the pictures over there and stuff like that. It's like, look, we allow all those options for a reason. It's for the advanced users who want to be able to do things like that. But if you're not sure about what you're doing, like, if you don't have some master plan, which is why you're doing stuff like that, just, I guess, don't be don't be eccentric enough in your usage that you set up weird problems that don't need to be there. I'm going to say, if you don't have a good reason otherwise, when you're running installer and it says, look, there's a button that just says next, or you could hit a bunch of options to customize things like that. In general, you should be hitting yourself saying next, unless you've got a good reason not. Everyone who writes software, everyone who markets software is thinking the same thing. We know that most people will hit next. And so even though we feel like we have to give you options at a time, man, a lot of us, we wish we didn't, because, we know that a lot of times you can kind of talk yourself into putting things in a weird place, then kind of forgetting you put them in the weird place. And then when you go to look in the default place for it, it's not there, and trouble begins, and suddenly tech support happens. And we hate that. So don't overthink things in general. But anyway, that's about it. Okay, that's the base. So my basic tips, right? We talked about the kind of computer you want. When you use Windows, keep it updated. Avoid the scam guys. Use the defaults, right? Like when I installed on the new computer, I literally just hit next or accept about 5 times in a row, and that was it. I was done. All right, now this is we're still on Windows tips here, but I'm going to call these ones chicken and egg traps. So basically, these are things that are bad, but you won't feel when they're asking you like you're qualified to make the decision at the time. So these are pernicious, garbagey things, and all I can do is say I am sympathetic to all the people who don't fancy themselves as computer geniuses who fall into these things, because this is just either Microsoft or hardware vendors or software vendors just screwing you over and making things hard. And this is, again, you give good advice on one hand, like, hey, keep your stuff updated, but watch out for the sneaky update guys. Use the defaults. But here's the part where I say, yeah, but watch out for these ones. So let's go through a few of these. Number one, if you just got a brand new computer, uninstall the garbage programs. So you're going to go through, and let me see, let's swap over to my demo computer over here for a second. All right, so there's ComicBase, but when you get any new computer, you got your Windows logo over here. You're going to go under here under the Windows menu and type the word programs, and that'll take you to either the apps menu or the add and remove programs. And you'll find out that even though I installed just ComicBase and just about nothing else, you'll find out that there's, I don't know, between a couple dozen and a few bajillion programs installed, just because that's what was on the disk when it first came out the door. Now, the ones that came from Microsoft, generally harmless. They might have stuck a copy of Office 365 on there just for the hell of it. They might have stuck the Xbox control panel, because it's so important for me to interface with my Xbox, etc. Look, most of the stuff harmless, not really in the way. I'm not hugely worried about it one way or another. But look, you're within your rights to say things like, look, I don't care about getting the weather on my computer. Lose it. Again, it's like, this computer here is never going to interface with an Xbox. Lose it. what's generally worse isn't the Microsoft ones, but when you get your computer from like Dell or HP or so forth, there's this kind of crummy game that goes on where software vendors are paid between a couple bucks or actually quite a bit. I mean, there are licensing agreements where essentially they're paying the entire cost of the Windows license in order to dump their Norton suite or their McAfee suite onto your computer. So, the system bundler like HP or Best Buy says, boo, yeah, heck yeah. So I don't need to pay for the Windows license for this computer because it's paid for by McAfee. Terrific. All I got to do is bundle the free 90-day version of McAfee onto the machine and, onto the machine image. And I'll tell myself, yeah, it's a win for my users. They get all this free security suite and they can try it, and it'll be wonderful. McAfee does this because they know most people have been scared to death of viruses. They've been scared to death of lots of stuff in life, and with some cause. But what they know is that you'll start using McAfee or you'll start using Norton or where else, and when that 90-day notice saying, oh, it's about to expire, you'll be in real trouble once this thing expires if you don't pay for the update, because then your computer will be completely overrun with viruses. They know that a lot of people will just hit this, oh yeah, I guess I better subscribe. It's very important. And they'll keep that subscription for life. And so that's why it's worth it for them to pay, 20, 30 bucks, whatever they got to do to get pre-installed onto everyone's machine from the word go. And there's also things like, they call it shovelware. I think things were worse in the past than I've seen more recently, but there's, hardware vendors and things like that. They'll say, hey, we'll have a value add for our users hereby. We'll bundle free photo editing software. We'll bundle free movie making software. We'll bundle free blah, 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 blah software. And it's the crappiest software, which came from the crappiest places, and a lot of it is just running all the time. And it's just kind of in the way, distracting. It puts up alerts. You never install it yourself, so you don't know why you're getting an alert. You don't know what the thing is. You have no idea why these things are relevant to you at all. It's a really good idea to kind of start getting the habit of saying to yourself, look, every program on my computer, if I don't know why I want it, have a really serious thought about just getting rid of it. And this is the part where this is a pain in the butt, especially, is because when you get a new computer, you don't know what's good. You don't know what's worthwhile, what's not. You trusted the people who sold the computer to you to be straight with you and tell you, what you do and don't want. By the way, I'm uninstalling OneDrive right now, which is the worst offender of them all right now. That is one of the few Microsoft programs that is genuinely, well, it's beyond useless for most people, but actively a pain in the butt if you're using a database program like ComicBase. Microsoft Copilot, that's their AI venture. Maps are never going to be used from this computer and so forth. Anyway, but look, I guess the advice would be, even though you don't feel qualified to make these decisions right now until you've used these things, have it in your head that people have probably stuck a bunch of junk on your computer without you asking for it, and that a lot of it can go. And so, at some point, sooner rather than later, resolve to yourself that you're going to go back and look under your programs files and get rid of anything that it's been annoying you, bugging you, or just frankly just not adding to your day, if it lets you. Now, you'll find out there's a couple things like Microsoft Edge. Microsoft just makes it so you just can't uninstall it. You're going to use their browser one way or another. It doesn't need to be your default browser, but they won't let you uninstall it. Microsoft Teams, that one you can get rid of. But all the other garbagey shovelware that is bogging down your computer, but more importantly, distracting you. Really put yourself in mind that, yeah, if this is garbage, lose it. Just have that in your mind. You can't usually do it right first thing, off, but have it in mind that you'll do it later at some point. All right. Number 2, turn off distractions and notifications. I'm going to say your phone is the worst offender in this case, but your computer's getting pretty bad too. you will notice if you use a computer for more than like 5 minutes a day, that it's going to be wanting to put up lots and lots of notifications, either full on dialogue box things that just pop up in the middle of nowhere and say, oh, hey, you need to pay attention to this right away. Otherwise, bad things will happen. Or more likely, it will be just putting up alerts in different places saying, oh, no, well, you got to watch out for this. You got to watch out for this. And if in the modern era, I gotta say, one of the biggest challenges is the war for your own attention span. We largely lose this against our phones. If you just watch people in restaurants, you just watch people trying to have a conversation at all, people just are so used to having their phone bloop off in their hand every 2 seconds that it just becomes like a nervous twitch we've all got. Don't let your computer be the same way for you. Your computer ought to be a place where you can actually sit back, think, get some work done. And so you've actually got to actively go to war against the things that are trying to take that away from you. Windows allows you, if you look for it, to turn off. So if you see down here in the notifications area, look at the notification settings that they've got there and get rid of as much stuff as you possibly can. Windows also has a mode called Do Not Disturb. Use it. Basically, it says things like, look, I check my mail first thing in the morning. I check it at night between the hours of 10 and 4:30. Do not show me email notifications. Matter of fact, maybe don't have it show you email notifications, period, because you probably check your email frequently enough. You don't need to be told when a new email comes in. Little random things like, oh, hey, it's time to run a manual virus scan, things like that. Have it dial that stuff down as much as you possibly can. Like this Microsoft Defender summary. Oh, hey, Microsoft Defender antivirus did not find any threats since your last summary. Wow, that's so not useful to know. So basically, you're going to interrupt me to tell me, oh, hey, by the way, everything's fine. So yes, when you click on do these things and you say, show fewer notifications, yes, absolutely. I would like to not see recent activity. Tell me when there's a problem. But don't tell me just, oh, I ran a scanner, good for me. Go ahead and tell me when something bad happened. Sure, show me when there was a threat. Show me when there was a file or an activity that was blocked. Sure, great, I'd love to know that. But don't just tell me you ran a scan and everything was good. Really go to war on this one and get rid of as many notifications on your computer as you possibly can live without. You can always go to these programs and check their statuses at different points, but for God's sake, don't let them just put up a full-on bleepy bloopy alert in the middle of everything, because whatever you were doing at that moment will go right out the window, and you'll just find your productivity just goes to hell if everything on your computer is allowed to just beep at you, and everything in your computer will want to beep at you. By the way, one of the worst offenders in the new Microsoft Windows 11 over here is it's a thing called the widgets. You'll notice on this one over here, I've already turned it off on my taskbar, which, by the way, if I switch to the PC, you can actually see. But down here in the taskbar, there's a widget area there, and they designed it purposely to be almost guaranteed to be hit by accident. And when you do, it immediately pops up all the Microsoft news, all the latest weather, all the whatever else, and you will kiss every single time that happens. Whatever train of thought you had going will be out the window. You will kiss the next 5 minutes of your life goodbye as you stare at random headlines for garbage you do not care about. So yeah, do go to like your taskbar settings over here. Turn off widgets unless you use them. I'll show you the widgets just so you know what I'm talking about, because you'll recognize it instantly. Turn off the widgets. Widgets are these guys right there. And suddenly it's like, oh wow! Did you know 19 things people treat as safe? They're actually pretty dangerous. Oh no, the 41 biggest wastes of money. Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. $12 cash back. And again, whatever I was thinking 2 seconds earlier before I hit this icon by accident, it's gone. Get rid of it. It's it's lovely having distractions once in a while, but man, that's just it's an attention suck, and it's just you're gonna be happier and be much more relaxed and much more productive if you just turn as much of this crap off as you can stand. Turn off the Copilot preview unless you use AI type stuff. If you don't use Task View, turn that off. Basically, lose all the icons that are likely to distract you. This is the Windows Store. Do I go to the Microsoft Store every 5 seconds to do things? No, I do not. So guess what? Lose it from my taskbar. Get your visual space is as refined as you possibly can, but turn off the garbage. And then again, I refer to these ones as the chicken egg ones because you don't know that they're the unneeded ones until they've annoyed you a few times. But once you've got something on your computer that's annoyed you a few times, look for a way to get rid of it. All right, now the most controversial one I'm going to say here is watch out for the AV suites. I've talked about this a bit before. AV is antivirus, but there's lots of reasons to hate them. Number one, most of them have bribed their way onto your computer. You didn't really need them because Windows comes in just out of the box with a damned good antivirus software built in. It's called Windows Defender. It regularly wins the shootouts, especially in its offline mode for virus detection, because it's built by Microsoft. It's free and it runs fairly efficiently, which is to say it doesn't murder the performance of your computer nearly as hard as Norton, McAfee, Avira, Bitdefender, blah, 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 blah. I mean, there's a million of these guys. There's a lot of money in this space. And again, it's based on fear, and it's not entirely unjustified fear, because there's a lot of bad guys out there trying to get into your machine. That being said, since Windows 8, Windows Defender has been a free part of Windows. I mean, look, prior to Windows 8, absolutely buy yourself antivirus. But ever since Windows 8, Windows Defender came out. It was really anemic in its first iteration. It got really, really good in its current iteration. And I'm going to say for most people that I know personally that I would give a personal recommendation to, it's like, use the built-in one, get rid of the bundleware, the McAfees, the Nortons, etc. The reason I say that in general, number one, it's not just the price. The price is the least of it. Is they tend to absolutely murder the performance of your machine. If you go into the Task Manager, click on the Windows by the icon here and just type Task. You'll see a thing come up called Windows Task Manager, and this lets you see what's really running on your machine at all given times. And it's actually shocking because even as stripped down the machines we've got going on here, there's like 100 things running, at the same time. I mean, it's amazing how many things are running on your machine. If you ask me, just naively, hey, how many programs are you running right now? I'd be like, well, I got the Task Manager open and I've got ComicBase open, and that's it. Yeah, it turns out I've really got about 100 things open. There's only 2 that have windows that I get to see directly, but all those other suites are still running down here. Now, most of them are at the moment not burning too much of my CPU, not burning too much of my disk, so forth. I mean, this is pretty light load. 3% CPU. That's as easy as a computer ever takes it, because it should. I'm not doing anything at the moment. But if you were to watch this thing, if I were running McAfee, etc., you would see these things absolutely be just eating the hell out of all your performance on your computer. In particular, anytime that you do anything involving files. Now, I am representing a database software company right now. What do we do a lot with? That would be files. So if you're looking back over here on ComicBase and you see, okay, here's all the covers of Spawn, right? What are all of these? These are little picture files, right? And so when I'm looking at, Spawn 10s right there, literally the thing that ComicBase just did there in that second was it downloaded a file called 10.s. It had a thumbnail of it ready before, but I auto downloaded the full version and then showed it to you. That's the magic trick that just happened. So, there's 10t. Up until the moment I clicked on it, only the little file existed there. Now, this works really well. I mean, basically, as fast as I can click, full-sized images are popping into view, and it's really cool. But if I was running McAfee, Norton, some kind of really heavy antivirus, what would be happening between those two things? And by the way, when I download these ones, they got checked by Windows Defender as they were going, but McAfee and things like that would do some kind of really elaborate checking on the picture file that just takes that extra half a second, 1 second, but it would do it times every file that it touched. And as a result, anything that involves opening or unpacking or doing anything with lots and lots of files, like picture files, which I don't know, there's a couple of pictures involved here. All that stuff starts grinding to a halt. And where you really see this is, again, it's like a call I took earlier in the week. Uh, this lovely lady had spent like 4 hours installing one set of picture discs in ComicBase, and I'm like, 4 hours? You got to be kidding me! How did that happen? I figured, she's on the dark side of the moon. She only gets lunar satellite, occasionally is it passes perihelion. I couldn't imagine what was happening. But what was really happening is she was running a very heavy antivirus suite. Her computer was not particularly powerful, and her internet was a little dodgy. And you put those three things together, and it just added up to misery. I mean, compare and contrast 4 hours to install one set of discs for this lovely lady. Just thank you, antivirus suites and things like that, versus 18 minutes for me to install it on this crummy $249 computer that we're demoing on right now. 18 minutes is what it ought to take. Now, the funny thing is, if there was a way to turn off even Windows security, Windows Defender, we've run tests where we went to extreme measures to turn off the Windows built-in one. If you could turn it, if it was possible to turn off everything at all, even for a few minutes, which is because Windows actually really tries to watch out for your security, and they make it so that if you're not running anything else, they typically won't even allow you to turn off at least one antivirus suite. So they're going to be running something. But there were some very hacky things we did at one point where we got Windows Defender itself to shut down for a couple minutes. And we were able to install ComicBase with all million files in like 6 minutes. It installed, ComicBase, all the support files, and 1 million picture thumbnails in 18 minutes using Windows Defender. It was taking 4 hours to install half that number of things for her. So consider very seriously your antivirus situation. And I know I'm at this point, probably the comments are blowing up with people saying, no, I've been using Bitdefender since I was a child and it saved me from a million things, and you're a terrible person. You go, why? Yeah, yes, people get very passionate about their antivirus. I get it. What I'm saying is, consider whether you can live without it. I'm not saying live with nothing, because remember, even if you uninstall every antivirus thing on your machine, you'll be using Windows Defender. In Windows 11 in particular, where you're joined to the Microsoft domain by Microsoft account when you start up, like I say, it is basically impossible to run without antivirus. Now, all these things will not help you if you're determined to click on malicious programs on your machine. So don't get me wrong, you still got to be a sensible person when you use your machine. But it isn't like you're running, naked through the woods. If you uninstall the labyrinthine antivirus software that came pre-installed with your machine, you're almost certainly going to be protected by Windows Defender, if nothing else. But I would say consider uninstalling, and I'm saying uninstall, don't turn off, because if you say turn off, you'll also, if you look in Task Manager, find out that most of them will just lie to you. They will say, oh yeah, we've turned ourselves off, no problem. And you'll see that every one of them is still running a dozen different processes and eating just about as much resources as they were eating, before you said turn off. So I do mean uninstall temporarily. You could reinstall it again if you find that you really like them, but consider uninstalling your antivirus, using the built-in Windows stuff, and seeing if your machine doesn't just run a hell of a lot better, or at the very least, if it doesn't run so much better that it's not like having, like, I'd say, like, my bare minimum requirement for an antivirus suite is it shouldn't be as bad as having a virus. And man, I cannot say that about a lot of the modern antivirus suites, because they've just bloated themselves over time, where they do so much more than just scanning for viruses and doing things like that. They just eat the hell out of so many computers. So I know this is controversial advice. It's the least popular advice I give out to anyone in any circumstance, but I would say consider it. All right. With all that said, I've been yapping for quite a while. Let me go into the chat here just for a moment, and then let's talk about what you can do in ComicBase to get set up, and hopefully we'll move on a little bit faster than this, because I've really been taking my time. All right, so let's see. Okay, Greg said, yeah, I just tried to pop. Oh, Oh, can a barcode scanner also read this, send data from a QR code? Yes, it can. At least the ComicBase one can. By the way, if you guys are ever curious about that, if you do have like the ComicBase barcode scanner or like a really good one, scan the back of random things in your life, like your hotel key or your driver's license. Just open up Notepad and just scan them with the back of you of a barcode scanner. It's amazing how much stuff is buried in some of these barcodes. Anyway. All right, let's see here. Okay, some more comments in that one. Our mom wants to remind everyone, please, we hit Hulk smash like and subscribe buttons. That was the worst Hulk impression ever. Um, I'm wow, sorry about that, guys. I apologize for all of it. But yes, do smash the like and subscribe buttons. And if you're watching the show post live stream, please leave comments. In particular, if you note in the comments for the title itself on YouTube, it actually really helps in the algorithm. So thank you very much. And we also want to let everyone know we did get a new supply of our wireless barcode scanners. Those were out of stock for a little bit, but we have more, so that's good. And also, Mod wants to remind everyone that there are forums for ComicBase.com, forums.comicbase.com, and we not only have a lot of good stuff on there, but we have special threads up there for the live stream, so you can suggest topics and banter back and forth and do things like that. Jitsi Comics says, I'm scared to leave my house. What did I do? Finally, there's also a torrent link for Andre's world famous ComicBase cover catalog. Crazy! Imagine all the covers in ComicBase printed out, and imagine what that looks like. And you won't need to imagine because you can see that in the ComicBase cover catalog. And finally, please happy Free Comic Book Day this Saturday, and May the 4th be with you. I also believe if you guys are into Legos, there's also May the 1st. For some reason, completely eludes me. Is a May the it's some kind of Star Wars Lego Day. So I don't know if you're in the market for like a new Death Star Lego kit or something like that. I guess if you go into the Lego store today, they will give you free stuff. Not the Millennium Falcon model you were looking for, but they give you like there's some kind of free Star Warsy Lego promotion going on. So if you guys are into Legos, please do check that out because I know there's some crossover between some of these fandoms. All right, moving on. Let's talk about what in ComicBase. All right, I'm going to stick this one with some basic advice right now, but just how to get up straight. Like I said, if you launch ComicBase on a new machine and you just hit next to the defaults, you know what? If you're starting out new, you'll probably be just great. But let's talk about some other stuff. All right, number one, always be running the latest version of ComicBase. So if you got ComicBase off a disk, the disk was pressed at some point in history. We're working on new versions of ComicBase constantly. But if you run into any kind of trouble at all when using ComicBase, the very first question anyone's going to ask you if they sell software is, what version you're running and have you downloaded the latest patch? Typically, if your version of ComicBase is more than about 3 days old, there is probably a later version that is different in some new and very obscure way, because again, we are always working on the program. So if you're having any trouble, first of all, is go under the internet menu, go say check for updates. That'll certainly tell you about all the major required updates. We talked about 24.1 at the beginning of the program, but also always worth going to ComicBase.com. If you go to My Account and then Registrations, if you were to download the software, you would see the exact version and build number. And if that's later than the one you're running, and if you've been having any kind of trouble, do update your software first before you call, because there's a very good chance we've fixed whatever it is. So, it's like I say, if you're having trouble, it does not hurt to always have the very latest version. Now, it also doesn't always help. It may be, like I say, we held off pushing a required version of ComicBase for 7-8 months this last time, because the main version was running so stably for everybody that there was no real compelling reason to go further. But if you are of a mind where I gotta have the latest and greatest, do this. In ComicBase, let me pull up the magnifier so I can zoom in on a couple of these things. Magnifier. Okay. So in ComicBase, go to the internet menu. I'm sorry, the setup menu. Go to preferences and have a look at a couple of preferences. Number one, if you have it checked for updates, I think the default on this is once a week. go ahead and say each time a database is opened or once a day. Doesn't hurt, right? So if we do push a new major version, you'll get it sooner than the other kids. Um, but each time a database open also does not hurt. But this button down here, check for interim updates. What that'll do is it will tell you whenever we do a build at all. So it doesn't need to be the major builds that come out once a quarter that we push onto everybody, but you'll be able to get all the latest stuff if you want to. Now, you don't feel like you need to, because most of the time we're doing a little tweaky stuff. It's very weird. It's very obscure. You may never come across the new features. At least not right away. I mean, things like we added the new Turkish, the new Turkish lira. You may not care, but if you want to see the very latest and greatest, it does not hurt to put this in there. And then every time if like we have set to check for updates every time a database is open, if there's any new build whatsoever, you'll be told, and you can download the latest version and get that. All right. Number 2, big tip. Switch back to me. Turn off your antivirus when you're running installers. I mentioned this poor lady, it was taking her 4 hours to download one set of pictures, from one of the two discs and install ComicBase. And she's like, yeah, you have the worst program ever. Because, she's being really sweet. But if I was her, I'd be like, you have the worst program ever. It takes 4 hours to install. And I'd be like, well, no, actually, it doesn't take 4 hours to install. You just have really bad antivirus software because it's being really, really slow and eating too much of your computer's resources. And as it sees us try to decompress a million pictures, it's turning that into a week-long process for you. Anyway, when you're running any installer for any program, like if I know I'm installing the newest version of Photoshop, I know I'm installing the newest version of Word, turn off your antivirus software during the install. Your antivirus software, if you know what you're installing and it comes from a reputable person, it can only get in the way. It can only block things. It can only slow things down. Now, I realized we used to give this. Everyone used to give this advice to people when they're installing things. But the problem, of course, is it sounds like we're trying to pull a scam on you. You're trying to install a virus. No, we're not. We're trying to just install files. and your crazy antivirus software is half the time, when it does anything at all, is it's blocking things and causing the installers to fail. So yeah, I mean, like if you're just using your computer, reading emails, doing things like that, and you get a virus alert, that's when you want your antivirus software to be saying, whoa, you did not mean to be installing this. But when you say, yes, I am intentionally installing something or other, yeah, tell your antivirus software to take a break. In particular, if you're installing, like, say, a brand new version of ComicBase Archive Edition or something where we're going to be decompressing a million files, the difference between doing this with your AV turned off or at least dialed down and running full bore could be a matter of hours. So yeah, it's a really good thing to plan on doing. Now, if you're using the built-in Windows stuff, don't worry about it. It's fine. It's as dialed off as it can be. And honestly, ComicBase plays very well with the built-in stuff. We play very well with the built-in Microsoft Firewall. We play very well with the built-in with the built-in antivirus software. That's the stuff most people will have. It's the stuff we test the most extensively against. And you don't need to do any special configuration or anything on that one. So if you're using the defaults on that, it's all going to work out great for you. But if your thing came pre-installed with some kind of huge antivirus suite or whatever else, yeah, turn that stuff off when you're running an installer for sure. All right, number 3 tip, put your ComicBase files in the right place. So ComicBase, importantly, lives on your machine. It doesn't live on our servers in general. There's, there are other programs in the world that, you don't really own your data. With ComicBase, you do. If your data lives on some guy's server and the second you stop paying them for it, you stop having a comic book software, inventory of your collection. Yeah, we could make things simpler if we stored all your stuff, but it would kind of come with that kind of bargain built in, and we don't want to be those guys. Your ComicBase database lives in a file typically called ComicBase Database, strangely enough, on your computer. And if you just install ComicBase with the default things and you don't customize anything in any way, that's where all your stuff will be. So we like the idea of you owning your stuff. It's just I guess we're kind of a libertarian at that heart, where we don't really want to control every aspect of your life. We would like you to have your stuff and enjoy it. We do not want you to own nothing and eat the bugs and all that other crap. So, we just hope we win enough of your love that you come back to us year after year and renew. But if you don't, well, I guess we deserved it because we didn't make you happy enough. At least that's what keeps us honest in this whole game. So we don't stay in business by holding your data hostage, and if you don't continually pay for us, we take away your stuff and never let you see your data again. But with that, it comes with some responsibility. So in general, put your data in the default database. Give it, ComicBase database. Put it in the default place. It'll be, the easiest place to find. If you ever reset your preferences or you forget the special setting for the whole thing, there's less to worry about. We can all get through the day a little better if we say, well, hey, I had ComicBase on my old machine, but I forgot where it was, and I moved it to another drive, and I forgot where the drive was, and then I know I had a drive that crashed. And at this point, I'm just recounting at least 2 tech calls we took last week. And what do I do now? Because I'm not even sure where anything is. It's like, well, okay, it's hard, and there are tools we've got to help you find these things. There's a thing called the ComicBase Database Manager that will, you go into your file menu, go to File Tools, and say launch the ComicBase Database Manager. It will scan all of your hard drives for everything that looks like a ComicBase database, tell you what's in it. The reason we built these tools is because people will put things in strange places and then forget they put them there, and then hilariousness ensues. Actually, it's not very funny for anyone, but we'd like you to be able to find your stuff. But because the stuff lives with you, it means you can't just throw it anywhere and expect us to know, because we don't. It's your stuff. Anyway, so I'd say unless you've got a reason not to, go ahead, let your ComicBase database be called ComicBase Database. When we say, hey, we'd like to store it in the ComicBase Databases folder, that cool with you? Just click yes. Yeah, you might have a solid reason for saying no, in which case that's great. But it then becomes your responsibility to remember where you put it, because otherwise we don't know. But yeah, no, I'd say do that. Now, one caveat on this one is if you are using OneDrive, and if OneDrive was installed on one of those machines where they pre-installed it and they remapped your documents folder, so that when you actually are trying to store things in your documents folder, you will find out they're secretly being redirected to a thing called OneDrive/documents. You may see us give you a message which says, hey, look, it looks like OneDrive has kidnapped your documents folder. We're not going to put things, or we would like to not put it in the regular location. We'd like to put it in the public documents, which is outside the reach of OneDrive. If so, go ahead and click the yes button on that one. And again, we'll try to get you out of the trouble that OneDrive begins. I'll spare you the 15-minute rant on why OneDrive is from hell when used with database applications for now, because we've done that at least on 3 other live streams. But in general, go ahead and just use the defaults. Put it on your fastest disk, which should be an SSD. If it is, then everything's going to work beautifully. And if you want to put your database on a shared drive, or you're using Parallels, so you're running it on a Mac using Parallels, it needs to be on a named volume. So you can't store it on what's called a UNC share. It can't be like \\Mac /C /databases or something. It has to be actually like Z:\/ ComicBase databases. This is obscure as hell. If this seems to apply to you, feel free to give us a call. We're happy to lead you through it. But otherwise, if you know what a named drive is, that's the magic secret sauce. But yes, if you're going to do something as unusual as putting it on a network volume, a network share, or on a Mac that's shared, like an environment that's shared between your Mac environment and your PC environment, and so it actually looks like it's running a network on the same computer, just remember, it has to be a named volume. It can't be a UNC share. And if that does apply to you and it still sounds Greek, give us a call and we'll lead you through it. Okay. Next big tip, and I would give you this one. This one mostly applies to people who are using ComicBase, but they came in from an older version and your preferences just kind of carried over. And so here's another one, cases where the defaults, if you're starting new, would be great for you. The defaults, if you're carrying it over from an old version, may suck. And one this applies to in specific is for the types of inventory that you're tracking in your database. So for this purpose, I'm going to go say check for updates. This one's already been updated, so I'm holding down the shift key to force it to allow me to pretend to update it twice. So give it just a second here. Like I said, $249 computer. So not the very fastest computer on the block. All right, there we go. All right. All right. So what I'm talking about in particular here is when you say check for updates, in the current era, it would default to this. It would, by default, ComicBase would have books, comic books, and magazines in it, but not newspapers. So if I was starting out on a brand new computer, that's how my defaults would have been. On the other hand, if I had a database that I'd used, say, in ComicBase 2020, and I was just using the same computer and I was moving forward, well, back then, once upon a time, we only had comic books, or then we added books, comics, and magazines, and then newspapers came along. Well, the default was we'd always tracked everything, so why not put those in too? Well, if you don't collect newspapers, right, and I'll give the case for and the case against newspapers really, very, quickly. Now, comic books, obviously, I'm going to assume we all collect comic books. That's why we're here at the party at all, right? Now, books, could be the Overstreet Price Guide. It could be the Art of Joe Chiodo. It could be, whatever, the Aliens Portfolio book. Things that have great art in them, but don't actually tell comic stories. If they're not periodical in nature, they're going to be listed under books. And the same token, you might have things like the Comics Buyer's Guide, or you might have Comics Journal or Wizard Magazine, or might just be things like the things that were periodic in nature, like the official history of the Marvel Universe, things like that, where they published it in comic form. They put it out every month. It was, but it didn't actually contain comic stories. So, using the Guinness World, definition of a comic book, which they use for figuring out who has the biggest comic book collection in the world, which we care about because that's one of our customers has that. Those things didn't count as comic books because they did not have comic stories. So those things are listed under magazines. As a result, books, comics, and magazines by default are part of what we would automatically update. Newspapers came along and they're cool. It is pretty cool pulling up the newspaper from the day Lincoln was shot, the cover of the New York Times from that, and reading what the coverage was back in the day, because it's really different than what you'd imagine if you weren't seeing it that, today. For that, like newspapers back then were like just broadsheets. They didn't use photos almost ever, or they wouldn't even use drawings. I mean, there was so much newsier back in the day. It's ridiculous. So that's really cool if you're into that sort of thing. If you're not into that sort of thing, it's an enormous amount of data that you don't care about. And for most people who buy ComicBase, the default these days is that we omit that. So if you're to say update the stuff and you were to say select all and so it would check off newspapers, or you'd check newspapers, at that point we would go ahead and happily download the 3.2 million newspaper records, and your database would become quite a bit larger. It becomes about 3.5 gigabytes in size. On the other hand, if when you're updating you realize, hey, I don't actually care about newspapers, but my preferences have been such that I've had them in my database this entire time because I came from an era when there only was one choice and it was all, then I've probably been downloading newspapers this entire time, and my database is probably huge and it doesn't need to be. So if you do not collect newspapers, or hey, maybe you don't collect anything other than books, maybe you don't collect anything in magazines, basically uncheck anything you don't collect. And when you go and you say update at that point, it'll say, oh, hey, I noticed you changed this. It's not the same as it was. Do you want me to get rid of the stuff that doesn't matter to you? And at which point, if it's not marked as being in stock. So we're never going to delete stuff that you actually own that has quantity greater than 0. But if you do that, you will find that, just by unchecking newspapers, that you will take your database down from about 3.5 gigs to about 1 gig. The updates will go faster. Everything in your life becomes just that little bit easier. So again, that's our default if you were starting out new, but there's a good chance that if you just were using the program all along and you've never just looked at this preference much, that you still got it set to all and you don't really know why, eh, uncheck, I'm going to say, things you don't collect. And it will help you quite a bit on that one. So that one tends to be a pretty big savings in, for a bang for your buck on that one. So yeah, go ahead and do that one. All right, other things that that are good things to check in ComicBase. So we have this program that comes with ComicBase, and it's called Sidekick, right? Because comics heroes, they got sidekicks, right? Now, Sidekick's job is to do all the boring stuff for you. It's to keep your database updated. It's to sync, post your stuff for sale. If you sell things on Atomic Avenue, it will, back up your stuff to the cloud. It does all the stuff that's just kind of tedious. And the way it does this is it runs as a little, it's called a notification area, program down here, along with things like, the clock and, the little utility for ejecting your USB drive and your Bluetooth connections and stuff like that. It runs down here kind of out of sight most of the time, but that's where you find it, is down here in the bottom right-hand corner. Look for the little superhero guy, right click on him and choose open, and then you'll see his interface. Most of the time, you're just going to ignore him. Now, Sidekick works really good if you occasionally leave your machine on with ComicBase turned off. So if my style of working is during the day, it's like, okay, yeah, I use ComicBase, I enter some issues of Spawn, yeah, did that, I've got some things, right? And then say, okay, great, it's beer time now, it's beer o'clock, and now I just say exit, and then it will go exit the program, and then it will back up the program, do stuff like that, and I'm already thinking about what kind of beer am I going to have tonight, so et cetera, blah, blah, blah. So, a day in the life of being me, right? Anyway, what happens then, Sidekick down here, is you look at his settings. He runs on a schedule, and typically at 11 p.m. at night, in this particular case, he is going to once a day check for updates. He's going to check and post. Well, actually, this one isn't going to check and post sales because that's set to default by never by default. He's going to save stuff to the cloud, and once a week, he's going to compact the database and so forth. But he's going to do all the boring stuff. He's going to do it in the middle of the darn night, and that works great. He actually needs ComicBase to be closed for him to do his stuff. For some reason, ComicBase is doing some cleanup work because I think I just ran a big update. That's why he's being slow to shut down. So give him just a sec. All right, now, so ComicBase is shut down. And you'll notice that all the buttons here just lit up on Sidekick, because Sidekick knows that ComicBase is closed now, so now he's free to do his stuff. But I don't even need to tell him to do his stuff, because he'll kick off at 11 at night and do it for me, and I can just, play video games, drink beers, whatever I do at night. That all works great so far as it goes. If you have a laptop and it's not typically left on at night, or if you don't typically connect to the internet, or if you don't fit that scenario where you are typically leaving your machine on at night, I'm going to say turn off the schedule in Sidekick, because it's not going to help you. The whole trick, the whole metaphor we use for Sidekick is it's like the shoemaker and the elves. If you remember that old fairy tale, is the idea that shoemaker's just knocking that stuff out, he's working his butt to the he's just until the exhaustion, and then he just collapses in a heap, in front of the fire, and then the elves come out and say, "Oh, he's working so hard. Let me take care of it for him." And then he wakes up next morning and is like, "Wow, I must have been great last night, because I've knocked out another dozen pair of shoes and I don't even remember doing it." Because the elves have taken care of it in the middle of the night. Well, that's what Sidekick's trying to do for you. It needs you to kind of leave the scene in order to do its thing. But then he'll take care of making sure, when you get up in the morning, oh, hey, there was a new database update and it's already updated. Terrific. But that only works if you leave the scene but leave your machine on. If that doesn't apply to you, just turn the schedule off, because it'll do nothing but annoy you. The most it'll probably do is you'll probably get some kind of internet error saying, "Hey, I just came out of hibernation and it was time for me to do something, but now I've lost my IP address because I can't connect to the server now because it hasn't reestablished my Wi-Fi connection." And you'll just get random error messages, and it'll just suck. So if that applies to you, just turn off the schedule. Just set all the schedules to never. And you don't need to turn off Sidekick at that point, because then Sidekick just works in manual mode. It's around if you want to trigger something manually, but it won't do anything by itself. But yeah, do go in and feel free to do that if you use your machine in that kind of style. All right. We already talked about double checking your preferences, in particular the update options. Let me go ahead and show that one, though, again, real briefly. There's a couple things you might want to pay some special attention to on those. Let me go ahead and go back over there. And remember, it's like, I'm talking up both sides of my mouth on this thing where I'm saying, yeah, like trust the defaults until you shouldn't. And this is the part where it's like you might want to have a closer look at this one. Um, like I say, by default, ha ha ha, joke intended. We try to make it so the defaults are going to be the ones that work for most people and don't get you in trouble. But there are some things that can make your life a little better if you change them. So if you go under, first of all, let's go under SEP and let's look at the preferences. The ones that we talked about, when you check for updates, that's one you might want to consider changing around. By the way, if you still have the old preference set on your computer from way back when this mattered to optimize automatically, I would typically say for almost everybody on the planet, turn this to never right now. The reason is because when we were still prior to ComicBase 2020, when we rewrote the entire database engine, we were using a database engine called Jet. Back then, it was crucially important that you kept the database optimized, or you would hit the 2 gig limit and it would suck. Your preferences, if you've carried over a database from way back when, might still be set to optimize automatically, like when, say, the unused space becomes greater than 10%. Do yourself a favor these days. Set that to never. It's with the new database engine, it's typically just not particularly helpful, and Sidekick will optimize it enough just doing his stuff that it won't really become an issue. So, where this comes out is, when you exit the program, you don't need to spend an extra minute or two exiting out of it while it optimizes the database if you set that to never. So do that. It's automatically set, by the way, to automatically back up your database when you close the program. It'll keep the last 5 backups, and they're in date stamp names, so you can go back in time if something weird happens with your machine or you did a crazy thing with your data entry and you need to go back. So I'd say typically leave that alone, but I would consider, if your machine's a little bit on the faster side, click this compress backup files to save space, because if you've got a little bit of extra horsepower in your machine, you can afford to, having your backups be compressed versus not will make them about a quarter of the size. So yeah, it's not a bad option if you've got a little extra speed. If you've got a really low spec computer and it's struggling to even run ComicBase at all, leave it with a default, which is not compressed, because being fast is probably the better value of over having the least disk space. But anyway, that's something worth looking at. All right, the rest of these ones I'd say are probably generally fine for most people, but feel free to look at them. I mean, if there's anything that strikes you as useful, go ahead and feel free to change the defaults. The ones I think that are probably a little bit more interesting, though, is, again, let's go ahead to the let's pretend we're pulling down a update. And when we say internet check for updates, and again, the trick I'm doing right now, because I've already updated, is I'm holding down the shift key and it will say, hey, did you want to re-download the one you've just done? I'm doing this purely just to be able to show you this dialog. All right. When you update, by default, remember, it's set to update all items. Go ahead and uncheck newspapers if you don't collect newspapers, or uncheck anything you don't want. How it updates your item values and prices. If you like our pricing or you want to use our pricing, by all means, leave that the way it is. If you prefer to do your own pricing, go ahead and change that. On the allow corrections to existing, I typically would advise people to allow it to check every single one of these ones. You might, for obscure reasons, series info and descriptions by default, depending on how old your defaults are, might be set to be unchecked. Go ahead and make sure, double check that one and check that one if you can. The reason is we want to be able to correct information in the database. We're always, every week we make thousands, if not tens of thousands of changes to pricing, to data. We add things, we update things, and so forth. And this allows us to make those changes. If you say, no, I have the data exactly the way I want it, I don't want anything changed, well, then uncheck the things you don't want us to change. But I would typically allow us to change anything we think is just wrong, and do that stuff. And by the way, we will never touch your custom fields. We will never touch your notes. We will only add to your notes. We will never overwrite your notes. So don't worry about those. Those ones are safe with you no matter what you've checked. Typically, if your internet speed's any good at all, I would say automatically download pictures for new releases if you're using the archive edition. And I also would, if you're using the archive edition, say fastest download, least disk space, I find is my happiest way, which what that means is when an update comes down and we've added, say, 5,000 new covers for obscure Brazilian comic books, or for that matter, for The Amazing Spider-Man, we're going to download the thumbnails, the ones you see down here, are going to be what comes down with, with the update. They take virtually no space on your disk, and they come down in a flash. It's really a great way. And then the second you get interested in any one of them and you happen to click on it, or have any reason to see it full-sized, in that moment, it says, well, do I have the full-size version? And if I don't, it pulls down the highest quality, biggest version we've got. So actually a better version than we can give you if you were even downloading the disk images, because disk images are limited to what we can fit on a disk. So in general, even if you have infinite disk space and things like that, I would suggest, as long as you've got a decent internet connection, go with the fastest download, least disk space is usually the best option here. And then finally, I would always suggest to people that you allow it to remove obsolete series and remove obsolete items. Make sure those are both checked. The reason is because things occasionally change names. You'll find out that the new Robin series, and it was going to be called Robin Attack on Bloodhaven, and it turned out it was just called Robin Third Series. Once you actually saw it, well, then there'll be a phantom. If we had been adding the stuff from the Diamond solicitations as they went, there'll be a phantom series in ComicBase called Robin Attack on Bloodhaven, which it'll turn out that will only have the pre-sale version of the issue in it, and everything that we're doing our current work in will be in Robin Third Series. So you want to allow it to get rid of these kind of phantom series and obsolete issues. If we find out something was solicited but never published, things like that, as long as they don't have your stuff listed as being in stock, we'll get rid of stuff that is irrelevant to you. I would always allow, those are generally not checked by default. We actually added a wizard to programs these days. We start the whole thing. It says, do you want to allow us to remove stuff like this? And we kind of, we give you some more text to educate you on it, but in general, we don't want to have any default be something that would remove data ever. So that's why I have special mention of those two. All right, and then whether or not you want to exclude immature titles from the database, personal preference, and entirely up to you. All right, so that is what I want to say about preferences. All right, just a couple more pieces of information, and we'll finally let you all out of here. It's one of the longest live streams ever done. Number one, only one database, unless you've got a special situation. So unfortunately, one of our ComicBase 5, we made a decision to allow you to create more than one database, and ever since then, we've been widely looking back and wondering if that was ever a good move. So it used to be there was just a built-in database. It was called ComicBase Database. You couldn't change the name, and it looked for that database in that place, and if it wasn't there, it just threw a hissy fit and said, "Where's my file?" Nowadays, you can make as many databases as you want. The reason is because you might have one database for stuff that's my kids or my friends, or the stuff I'm selling on consignment, or you might have lots of good reasons. But if you just are starting ComicBase and you just want to track your stuff and it's just your collection, you know what? I generally would tell you, let it be the default name, ComicBase Database. Let it be in the default location. ComicBase Database is under your documents, and at that point, just whenever you open ComicBase, it's always going to go to your last database, which at that point will be your one and only database, and you'll never have one of our most popular tech calls, which is hey, I called my database something special, and I put it someplace special, and now I don't remember where it is. And now it's opening up the default database. It looks like all my data is gone because it opened up the database I haven't been working in for 6 years, and I don't know where the right database is. Now, the answer, should that ever happen to you, is, we literally had a special utility written just to handle this problem. Is you go to the File menu, you go to File Tools, and you launch a program called the ComicBase Database Manager. And what that does is it's a special program whose whole purpose in life is to search every hard disk that's attached to your machine for something that looks like a ComicBase database and tell you what's in it and give you a big button that says use this one. So that, if you've put your data someplace special and it's under a special name and you don't remember it, it'll get you back on track. With that said, the whole point of this show is, give yourself the habits that will make it so you are set for success. For most people, you want the power to have more than one database if it's important, but for most people, just use the default database. Just run one database. Don't call anything special. Just let it be the normal thing. The database that first launches when you launch the machine, that's your boy. Unless you got a special reason. But if you do have a special reason and you do need to call it something special or put it someplace special, remember it comes with the responsibility where you got to remember what you called it. And if you don't, you got to wait till the file manager finds it for you. Okay. If you are using, if you're not using that, you're taking that lovely good advice we just given you, and you are running more than one database. So again, I'm running more than one database right now. I run one for showing you demo stuff, right? And I have another one that's our master database. And I have a third one, which is my real data, right? So I also don't, pay attention to this, my own advice on this one, but I have a reason. But if you're running more than one database, really, really good idea to change the color of your databases so that you know instantly which database you're in without having to read the little title at the top. The way you do that, you go into the file menu, go to theme, and pick a theme you like. The default theme is called Wave. It comes in different colors, and just pick either a different theme, like here's the darkness theme, it makes everything very dark and black, but make it so your databases really look different from each other, so that if I launch ComicBase and it comes up and it looks like this, I know instantly, oh yeah, that's the special database, and I won't do one kind of work in one database and then forget it and put the other work in a different database. So yeah, definitely, use themes to separate your databases. It's way more effective than trying to remember and to check the title bar at the top or keep them straight by launching one or launching the other. So anyway, that winds up helping. All right, and last final piece of advice, and then we're going to get the heck out of here and we'll finally have a beer, is when you do an update, pay attention. There's a little report that comes up at the end of an update. It says things like, okay, your collection is now worth $36,000, and you added 152 items to it since the last time you ran an update, and they gained in value or they lost in value X amount of money. And you might see a little tiny line in blue that says there were unknown items. Do you want to see them? If that happens to you, go ahead and click the little link for the unknown items, and it'll give you a report. And that report will basically come prefaced with everything I'm about to tell you right now, but basically says, hey, this is some stuff that you've got which we've never heard of. It's not listed the same way we list it, or it might be entirely new to you. So the most typical thing, if you're coming in from an old version of ComicBase, to be on those reports are things that once upon a time were listed as comic books but are no longer. So think about things like all those art books or the newspapers or the magazines, which back when ComicBase only tracked comic books and everything was a comic book, we had, if we wanted to track the Overstreet price guide, we would list it as if it was a comic book. Since we started fleshing out the other categories for books and magazines and now newspapers, we separated those collectibles into their own things. So if you've got a comic book called The Official History of the Marvel Universe or the Overstreet Price Guide or Wizard Magazine, and you see a second entry for under magazines for Wizard Magazine or under books for the Overstreet Price Guide or whatever else, at that point, you'll know that what's really happening is you still have your old entries from back when they were listed under comic books, and you need to move them to the right place. If that happens to you, what you want to do is you want to go to the demo PC again. And I'm gonna, I'm gonna pretend for a moment here that this is a case. So here's the Overstreet, Overstreet Comic Book Companion, right? Let's say you had that, but you might see two listings for it. You might see one where at the bottom it says book. Down here right there. And you might see a second one where if you looked at it, it would say comic book. What you'd want to do is go to the one that's a comic book, because it really isn't now. It's really being listed the way it properly is. And you would go to that title, you'd see your inventory under it, and just go under it and say edit, change series media type, and say, okay, no, it's not really a comic book, it's really a whatever it is. It's really a book, it's really a magazine, whatever the right thing is. And at that point, if I had these, unfortunately, this is a very clean database. It doesn't demonstrate this problem at all because it doesn't have any of these problems. But if you did have one that was listed in the wrong place, like let's say it had this listed as a comic book and you said, oh no, it's really a book, it would say, oh hey, I noticed that you already have another entry that is a book for that. Do you want to have me move your inventory into that one? At which point the answer is, oh yes, thank you. That'd be very helpful. In which case you would see that the fake Overstreet comic book companion, which was listed as a comic book, that will go away. All your inventory will get moved into the Overstreet comic book companion, which is a book, and then everything is good in the universe. And then the next time you run the update, you would see that one disappear from that list of unknown items. That's the most common thing to happen on those unknown item reports if you're coming from an old database, is that things will change their type. If you're, other things to look out for, sometimes things change name. We do get late breaking name changes on things. Again, think about that Robin attack on Bloodhaven becoming Robin 3rd series, in which case take a comic book that was from the old series that now seems to be unknown, look it up by its barcode, see if you don't get a match over someplace else, and if so, just at that point you're going to want to go in and change the title it belongs to. So you'd go to the bogus title, locate the issues in question, and you would say, where's it? Sorry, I don't remember where things are in my program anymore. But anyway, way I would go is I would right click on it and I would say transfer items to a different series. And it's to say, well, this isn't really Robin Attack on Bloodhaven, it's really Robin 3rd series. And then when you do that, it would have you choose the right series and would move your inventory over to the right series and get rid of it from the other one. And if it was the last entry of the old bogus series, then that series will automatically drop out, especially. And the stuff it's much less overhead in these things if you do have those two preference options set to remove obsolete items and obsolete titles, because the second you've gotten rid of all the things that don't have quantity 0, then those obsolete titles will drop out automatically and you have less cleanup to do. All right, well, anyway, we've had a really long live stream. Thank you so much for everyone for sticking with this one. And let me do a quick check of the chat before I sign off here. But thank you for everyone who hung out here, and we'll take it from there. 100 minutes, is that a record streamers? Beer and peace, Fred. No, there is, I swear. Yeah, ComicBase TV. Don't take away my multiple databases. No, we probably feel about that the same way that God feels about free will. It's like, well, gave you free will, but did you have to do that? It's like, it's like, yes, we want you to have the power. We really do want you to have the power to have multiple databases. Just please remember where you put your databases, because we don't want that to turn into all of our tech support issues. So anyway, no, we're joking, but anyway, there you go. All right, so Gregory, let's see another question here. Gregory, for example, beyond his 30 issues, I have only 7 issues. When I import the other 2 issues, be gray background with 7 issues will appear in color to differentiate. That is true. And I'm probably coming in from a different question here. So, all right. I think we got it. All right. So, guys, thank you very much for everything. And we're going to get out of here. And unfortunately, no slick outro on this one because for some reason, actually, I'm hoping for the best here. If I disconnect my shuttle and I power it down and I power it back up, what do we think the chances are of getting cool outro? Let's find out. We'll either have a cool outro or we're going to be just out cold. But have a good one, guys.